Good morning and welcome to First Atlantic Commerce. Here at the FAC Live Show, we cover all things e commerce in the Caribbean. Our guests join us from all over the world and generously share their expertise, knowledge, and insight into the digital world and how we operate within it. If you join us from LinkedIn or YouTube, thank you so much. Don't forget to follow our page to continue seeing content that will help you grow your business online. Today, we're talking about omni-channel payments across the Caribbean, and that is such a wealth, like it's a heavy subject. But we have to tie in the payment security side of things because, guys, this digital world that we're living in, we're all trying to navigate it. As always, I'm joined by Chris, the CEO of First Atlantic Commerce, and we have the privilege of speaking with our panel of guests today. I'm gonna just give you some heads up. Today we have Eldred. He is the SVP of Business and Partner Development at First Atlantic Commerce. This is his first time on the live show, so I hope that we give him all the support as we usually do. Chris, he brings 25 years plus experience in the payments industry, and he holds a BA in international business and management. We're also joined by John. He's currently the CEO of Trinidad and Tobago International Finance Center. He has over 10 years of senior management experience and supported both public and private sector institutions with the strategic guidance and fintech strategies. He holds a Master of Small and Medium Enterprise Management with a distinction from the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business. So we're going to bring in everyone right now. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. How's everyone today?
Morning.
Morning.
You good? You
Morning.
good? You feeling good? Yeah? Okay,
Excellent.
so morning. So we have quite a number of people registered for this event today, and some of them are going to watch it live, and some of them are going to watch it on replay. But I just want to oh snap. Here we go. Yeah. So I kind of dropped off a bit for a second. We want to tackle what is omni-channel because it's a term that is I don't know if it's new or not, and you guys have decades and decades of experience on this show. So who wants to tackle first the meaning of omni-channel?
So I'll jump in there.
I guess I could.
And
Oh.
good morning.
Yeah, good, guys, good.
Sure. So thanks for that. Thanks for and great to be here again this morning. So omni-channel for us, and if we look at this from a payments perspective, is really looking at the different channels that payments can come for different organizations. So we really look at this from an e-commerce online sort of virtual payments perspective, and then a physical world or a point of sale world where somebody is physically present actually making a card transaction or potentially a cash transaction.
Thanks for that, Chris. So we want to ask John to chime in there as well.
Yeah. Just expanding on what Chris said is exactly like that, right? Because one of the things that we started on our journey is when we were looking at, for example, the Trinidad and Tobago government, the strategy was always to start with an omni-channel approach. And as Chris said, right, is basically having multiple forms in which a customer could pay for the services, whether it be at a point of presence in the office, whether through a payment kiosk, whether it be online via cards, and in the Trinidad and Tobago context as well, leveraging mobile wallets from mobile money operators, or what we call EMIs, or even through what we will call our payment service provider cash agent network. So the idea is to provide as many methods of payments and convenience to the population.
And we're in a space right now where we're still trying to navigate this digital world and people feeling that cash is king. And this question is for Eldred, with your wealth of experience. We want to understand the key benefits of implementing omni-channel payments across specifically for the Caribbean region, because we have all this information of what's happening in the world, but why is this important for us in the Caribbean, Eldred?
Well, following in with what Chris and John have been saying about omni-channel, it's a interesting conversation because we're always looking at businesses and looking at different opportunities to generate more revenue. So understanding the different channels that are available to merchants in order to generate revenue is always part of the conversation. The challenge is obviously is how do you weave in all those fragmented channels, if you will. So you have, like Chris and John said, you have your card present environment, your traditional card present environment where somebody either walks up and does a transaction, they swipe, dip, or tap. And then you have your unattended, and then you move into the virtual environment where you have e-commerce, and you have self-servicing via virtual environment, whether you're using a wallet or whatnot. And then you have sort of a hybrid environment where this is happening more and more, where people walk into stores and then they're in a physical environment and they're essentially shopping in a physical catalog, right? So you find whatever you want, you try on whatever you're looking at, and then you flip over to an e-commerce environment or a card not present environment to do your transactions, because you could probably find something at a better price or a bigger selection. The conversation is, how do you weave these segmented environments all together where they make sense for the business? And the benefit is being able to drive your traffic as a merchant, drive your consumers into the different channels for whatever reason. It could be a strategic reason, it could be a supply reason, but being able to do this in a way that makes sense. Because if not, what happens is that one environment doesn't know what the other environment is doing, right? So you have inventory in one environment, you have reconciliation operations, and being able to do that efficiently on a unified platform it's really what we're talking about here. How do you bring all these different channels from different environments in a way that's cohesive, and the merchant can leverage the information, the statistics, the forecasting, the projections across multiple channels? I'm sure that as we get into the conversation, we're going to talk about how are these different channels, how are they evolving? Because these traditional channels that we're talking about are evolving right in front of our faces as we speak right now. And I'm sure we'll get into that later on in the conversation.
Thanks for that, Eldred. We have quite a number of comments, and we're going to get to you the realist updates. That is quite the name, and we're definitely going to answer your question soon. And shout out to Kashka Motley from Barbados. If you're having issues on LinkedIn with the stream, if you can just refresh it, because I just double checked and it looks like we're good to go, because Dwight Nelson has given us a heads up. He's in Trinidad and Tobago, and he gave us a heads up from LinkedIn. So thanks for letting us know, Kashka. All right, so we're talking about omni-channel payments across the Caribbean. And this question's for John, because I feel like we're getting very technical. So I want to take a little bit of a step back, because payments, when it comes to money, you know this, in the Caribbean, we want to physically see it. But in the context of an omni-channel, can we talk about it more simplistically, like maybe marketing? So in terms of a customer service, traditionally you pick up the phone and, Yellow Pages is the answer. But now we're like on multiple platforms, we're connected via WhatsApp. So what is it in layman terms you would think in terms of communication is omni-channel for the Caribbean?
So let me step back a sec and set some context, right? So the whole idea about omni-channel is when you look at the Caribbean, right, as a market, and we are very closely related, what I would say, in terms of particularly our behaviors when it comes to doing transactions and our relationship with cash, right? So cash is still very much king in the Caribbean, right? Recently, I saw a study where, and I'll talk a little bit about some early insights in our own studies. 2 out of 5 people in the Caribbean what we will call financially excluded, whether that is the system pushing them out in terms of the requirements and to open a bank account, or simply people leaving the formal economy in terms of not wanting to pay the high fees, not understanding the products and services, not having the transparency or the trust in the system, and choosing to transact in cash, right? And that's a huge number, but also a huge opportunity, right? Not just for businesses to understand, but also in terms of the providers, the FECs, the fintechs, that are really, what I would say, serving a need in the market, because one of the main reasons why people use cash is friction, right? And I don't think we are there just yet in terms of having the products in the Caribbean to reduce that friction. And because one of the main reasons, and we just recently concluded a nationwide study in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of understanding what really is our challenge. What are the barriers and challenges in terms of reducing the amount of persons using cash? And when we look at some of these statistics, it was very, very surprising. I don't think it's different for the rest of the Caribbean, right? Where we saw 12% of our population were using the debit cards, and we have over 1 million debit cards issued in Trinidad and Tobago. Credentials, what I would say, issued in Trinidad and Tobago. 2% of persons using their credit cards. But then we saw somewhere upwards of 70% of people still choosing to transact in cash. And these were everyday transactions, right? Going to the grocery, paying rent, paying medical fees, buying mobile top-ups. So these were what you would call your everyday types of transactions, right? So when we start to talk about omni-channel and it being, a sort of optionality, it actually is, from the marketing side, it's supposed to be a sort of core value proposition, right? Because when I just gave you that statistic, so, we do have what I would say limited businesses that are operating who only operate in what I would call doing simply card transactions without a cash option, right? Because there's the statistics I just gave there. If you are not prepared to accept cash, you're leaving out a huge percentage of the market, right? And one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is, public education and awareness in terms of how to use these products online, and then the simplification, right? Because to be quite honest, when you look at some of the, what I would say, the user experience for most, what I would call domestic e-commerce systems, still have a lot to be desired in terms of the user experience, right? There's a reason why Amazon has so much uptake, right? Because you can literally mistakenly order something on Amazon within 2 clicks, right? So I think that also plays a sort of large role from some of the insights that we are seeing. There's still too much friction. Cash obviously is, from a fees perspective, there is none, at least for the customer. On the merchant side, it's a different story. But then also the education and awareness, right? In terms of why should I be using my card, and all these different aspects. So I think the omni-channel conversation is very relevant in today's world.
That's such an interesting perspective, because I literally, as a consumer, I'm thinking, I want to use my card, but sometimes the experience isn't the best. And I've seen the data. We've had this on this live show and previous shows as well, where I mentioned, Amazon is the #1 visited e-commerce site across the Caribbean, not just Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh, and just add one last point to you, Pauline, that feeds into what you're saying there. When we looked at the MSME market, over 80% of that market doesn't have access to what we would call a point of sale. So they can't, as a merchant, accept digital payments. So you have a supply and a demand side issue now that creates a gap. Because as you said, right, you would like to use a card, but a lot of the times you have to go to get cash because the merchant doesn't accept,
So let's talk about the challenges from the merchant side of things, because at the end of the day, it's twofold, right? And you spoke earlier, John, about educating the customer, and this is one of the reasons this FAC live show has been created, because we're educating folks on what's available. So for Eldred, in terms of your background and understanding this omni-channel payment space, how can businesses ensure a seamless customer experience when adopting this omni-channel environment?
So one of the things that John just mentioned is it's extremely important. there is an ecosystem, if you will, right? So you have the card issuance side, which you have banks issuing cards to individuals, but then you have what we mentioned right now, which is the acceptance point. It's great that everybody has cards, but if there's no place to use them, then you revert back to cash, right? This happened to me recently when I was traveling. I was in a country, and I had to walk around with a whole lot of cash in my pocket. The exchange rate was significantly high, so the amount of cash I had was high. So when you're walking through these small, medium merchants, kiosks, if you will, and you're trying to purchase something, you get in a situation where you only have so much money, and then the merchant loses out on sales. So if you want to buy two items and you don't have enough, then you have to choose between the two items. And when you start having a conversation with merchants and you say, this is a perfect example why you need to accept credit cards. Well, the response is not that they don't want to accept credit cards, is they can't accept credit cards because the process it's complicated. It takes too long and it's too expensive. Whether it's working with financial institutions, that their requirements are so complex that it's almost impossible for a merchant to get a merchant ID in order to be able to accept credit cards, or the acquisition of a piece of hardware in order for them to accept the cards is too expensive. So what ends up happening is that they revert back to cash. One of the things that we have been looking at, especially at FXC, is where are we as a Caribbean nation? What technology exists around the world, and how can we use that technology to leapfrog where we are in order for us to be able to get to where we want to be? And there are absolutely technologies that can help us get there. So if we go down the traditional route of trying to put a physical terminal into the hands of a merchant, then you get into all these different challenges. But if we start looking a little bit outside the box, how can we help these merchants obtain not only a merchant ID through different partnerships that are out there, payment facilitators or whatnot, that we have as partners that are integrated in order to facilitate the tail end of these merchants, which is a smaller and micro merchants. But also, how do we leverage new technology to bypass the physical hardware that we all know that costs a lot of money for these smaller merchants, and use the technology that's already in their hands, a phone? How do we turn that phone into a powerful tool where it's not only used to make payments, but it's also used to take payments? The e-commerce side, in conjunction with that, can facilitate. So being able to generate, for instance, dynamic QRs on a user interface that they don't need a physical terminal. So you can convert a physical environment into a virtual environment. And we'll talk about Omni-channel. This is exactly what we're talking about. Looking at the different channels that we have access to, how do we leverage that technology so we can address the needs of merchants? I saw statistics recently that more than half of consumers go back and forth between virtual environments and physical environments. So if that's the case, and we have access to that with new technology, we should definitely be looking at payments from a strategic perspective on leveraging all these different channels that are available to us with the new technology, especially in our region.
Thank you for that, Eldred. So we have quite a number of questions in the comment section. So we want to get to that. But before we do, we're going to do a quick break and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're going to... Let's go. Okay, so it seems like we're having a bit of a technical difficulty today because the program that we're using is having some backend issues. So we're gonna try again for our next break, but we're gonna get right into the questions. So let's get back into it. All right, guys. So apparently we're just gonna go into it because the information is so important. So we have a question from the Realist Updates. Does First Atlantic have an online transfer system to facilitate online payments within the Caribbean, like for buying and selling online businesses, etc.? So, Chris, I think this one's for you.
Yeah, so we don't have a what we would call a sort of a person-to-person or person-to-business sort of transfer system, sort of rails, like a not like a bank transfer or like a sort of a Cash App or a Venmo type product. So everything that we provide is based upon the sort of traditional card rails. So the Visa, the Mastercard, the Amex type products where the merchant, whether they're in the e-commerce space or they're small sort of micro merchants that are looking for payment buttons or payment links or QR code type products, but all the payments that we enable for those clients are really based on somebody having a card, so a branded Visa, Mastercard, sort of credit or debit card from that perspective. So we have looked at sort of the individual transfer piece. The Caribbean does provide some challenges in regards to that in terms of, multiple currencies, multiple countries, multiple jurisdictions from that perspective. So everything that we have focused on is enabled on the sort of traditional card networks at this point.
Pauline, yeah, I think you're muted.
You would think by now.
Yeah.
All right, so let's try that again. Thanks again for that. So there's a lot happening in the background that most people are not seeing. We're actually having a little issue with LinkedIn. We just got a notification from the program. So my apologies for folks who may or may not be seeing this, but LinkedIn is having a bit of an issue with the live stream. But we do have folks from YouTube on the show. If you are still watching this on LinkedIn, please let us know. Give us a shout out, any comments. All right, so we have let's see if we have another question. Okay, so this one is for John from Shane regarding the research. Will you be able to mention it's available for participants to review?
So we just concluded and we still doing some correlation. So we working with like the central bank and other agencies just to make sure that our data, is representative. So once we get through that process, it is something that we will plan to engage with folks to sort of share. Because coming back from Chris's question, I think that's the main pain point I see in the Caribbean when I think about the MSME and the SME market, right? And I see it across, there's no Caribbean country, and again, this is just saying from the overall infrastructure perspective and the awareness perspective, where a small business could wake up one morning and say, I want to accept online payments, I want to accept bank transfers, I want to be able to set up an online store and accept all these payments in the next 24 hours. Because you have that whole supply chain, and I think about it in terms of, again, this is why I think I have a lot of hope for the regional fintech sector, because you do have companies operating. You have the WPAs, you have the Girasols, you have different entities that are providing the service. But again, as I said, the education, the awareness is just not there, right? Because, when you think about how do you get in contact with these companies, typically what you might have a business might call the bank and they may be looking for the service, but the bank may not have that product, and then I start to think about the non sort of FI sector, the credit unions and so forth, that again, these are solutions that they might want to offer to their membership and so forth, right? So that was just kind of just going on that point, Paulie. But once we get through the data and we do our sort of correlation, it is something that we will be engaging and providing, because the main point of this data was to help fintechs, the financial sector, the policymakers, what I would say, feed into developing a roadmap, at least from our perspective, trying to be able to really address the barriers of financial inclusion, what might be some decisions and interventions to be made.
Great. So, just a question for, I guess, extended from that one would be, is it possible to find reports on the Trinidad and Tobago financial sector developer website, the ttifc.co.tt?
We do have papers. We do have a lot of white papers on our stuff that kind of paint what I would call the supply side in Trinidad in terms of what's available. The survey we did is we never really had demand side data from the public. The last time, for example, and this is just for persons looking in, if you want to, the World Bank does what we call a FinDex study, a financial inclusion study across all the countries globally. They do it every year. Trinidad was surveyed the last time back in 2017 due to COVID and so forth. I don't think they were able to come in and do this survey. I think Jamaica was recently surveyed, Barbados, etc. So you can go on the World Bank's website and just Google FinDex. You will get at least some data from representing the Caribbean in terms of what is the state of financial inclusion from there. So we did our own study because we wanted to do some customized indicators that weren't represented on the FinDex side. So there is that, and then we also have some data on our website on the TT side.
All right, thank you so much. For those who are watching this, you could head over to www.ttifc.co.tt. All right, so I'm going to try again for this next break. And when we come back, we will continue the discussion around omni-channel payments across the Caribbean and payment security. We'll be right back. Good morning and welcome back to First Atlantic Commerce. Here on the FSC Live Show, we cover all things e-commerce in the Caribbean, and our guests join us from all across the world and generously sharing their expertise, knowledge, and insight into the digital world and how we operate within it. If you're joining us from LinkedIn or YouTube, thank you so much. Thanks for letting me know that you're still watching it on LinkedIn. I see your comments. And don't forget to like and follow our page to continue seeing content that will help you grow your business online. So we're discussing omni-channel payments across the Caribbean and payment security. Now, if you're just joining us on the show, we have so many videos on YouTube, and we did discuss payment security. But I feel like this is such an important discussion that you can't talk about it enough. So when it comes to omni-channels and security, more specifically data security, there are requirements. I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, the banks, all this information, why you need all this information? So I want to ask the next question to Chris, because as a consumer myself, I'm like, but doing this show over the years and realizing that it is important to have all this information. And when it comes to the regulatory requirements specific to omni-channel payments and data security, what does that look like in the Caribbean?
So, over the years, that has certainly started to evolve. But when you're looking to accept payments either online or physically at a point of sale, in order to get those merchant accounts from the banks themselves, you have to go through an application process. And this is really where I think potentially the crux of some of the issues come up, and people's perceptions of being able to accept payments other than cash, because there is a process that you have to go through with each individual bank. And that is in part driven by the bank itself, in terms of its own policies and procedures, in terms of the risk that it is comfortable with taking on. Some of it is done by the regulatory authorities of the individual country or the central bank. And some of that is imparted on them by the card associations themselves, so the Visa, the MasterCards, the Amexes of the world, in terms of providing their solutions to banks and then ultimately cardholders and merchants that accept those cards. So there are a lot of moving parts there, and a lot of people that have input into why you have to provide KYC or sort of know your customer documents, or AML, sort of anti-money laundering documents to apply for those services. Now, how do we, I think that the key and the trick here is really how do we make that easier and relevant to each individual section of either, merchant or cardholder that's looking to get those services. Because, if we apply the same, thinking that we would for a traditional loan to applying for a merchant account or a credit card itself, we're really not using the most sort of modern thinking or underwriting procedures to get there. So, historically within our region, when you apply for a merchant account, you go to the bank directly, you ask for an application form, you fill in all the forms, have to provide all the documents, usually in hard copy, with a sort of a wet ink signature on there. And that has been a longer process, right? And, but now there are a number of technology solutions that make that easier, and reduce the amount of time, the amount of people that you need to do that, improve the decision making to get people approved for these type of merchant accounts, that to be able to accept all these new solutions for payment. And I think that's really where, sort of we come in, where John's organization comes in terms of that education point, not just for the merchant and the card holders, but for, also the financial institutions, to get everybody to a point that makes it quick, easy, and appealing to apply for and use all those different products and services. So, I think Eldred alluded to this earlier in terms of, sort of payment facilitators, and John mentioned companies like WePay earlier as well, where, these companies specialize in attracting and onboarding merchants to be able to give them access to products to better sell their products or services online, by accepting different card type transactions. So, those, and those make it much easier for people to get there. So, people talk about Stripe and PayPal all the time when we're talking about solutions in the region, and why can't we have those, and their solutions a lot easier. And why they've been successful in countries like the US, like Stripe and PayPal, is because they have automated a lot of the process. They understand the risk, in terms of, not all merchants represent 100% loss. So, they've taken the time and energy to do that. And I think, if we can start streamlining that within our own region, it will have a significant impact on making us move forward in terms of moving away from a cash-based society to a more digital society.
All right. So that is quite a lot to take in. So, if you're watching this, don't worry, there's a replay. So there's a lot of information there. So from the private sector, we have all these solutions, but I want to direct this question to John. The Trinidad and Tobago Financial Center, the TTIFC, is a state agency charged with the development of the financial services sector. Can you give us some insight to how this kind of fits in and why it's important, the omni-channel discussion? Like, people are like, okay, so what do you actually do? Can you sort of like, fit that in terms of this discussion?
So let me translate it in terms of a use case, right? So for every Caribbean country, the amount of cash in your economy is a problem, right? There's no secret. The Caribbean, we are at an extreme disadvantage because of our correspondent banking situation, right? Which is one of the main challenges, I would say, where you would have the FIs and having to establish what I would call these lengthy onboarding processes, right? Because of AML and counterterrorism financing, and being able to demonstrate that burden of proof that we are not onboarding bad actors, right? Because we have seen, we have examples what happened in the Caribbean. We saw what happened with Belize, and Belize lost all of their correspondent banking relationships, and it's a balancing act, right? For the what I would call the traditional banks, right? Because yes, they want to provide the solutions, but at the same time, it's a measured approach, right? It's a real fine balancing act, right? So coming to the point where I was, in terms of what we really do here, Pauline, this is the use case, at least where we want to, the ambition is to get Trinidad and Tobago to become a cashless economy status. And the use case for that is and I'll give you a use case. I go in on a Saturday morning, I go in on the road to buy a doubles, go in the grocery, go in the market, and pick up some bread. I should not have to walk with my wallet. I could have a mobile wallet on my phone, and I can transact digitally at all those touch points, right? On the same token, somebody who is the merchant, right, who is looking to start a small business, who bringing in clothes to sell, doing lessons on the side, doing tutoring, bringing in electronics and doing delivery, they should be able to go online, create an account, download a soft POS, and be able to transact that exact same day. That is what we are trying to do in terms of all the strategies, all the programs, working with the Ministry of Finance, working with our private sector, financial services sector, trying to establish the fintech sector, because all those things I just described to you, the key enabler from what we have seen is really to get to incentivize a fintech ecosystem. Because while we focus on a lot of payments, one of the big points that I think was being raised is the lack of what I would call a eKYC sort of solution, right? And we don't really have. Recently, we just concluded our own fintech sprint in partnership with the UNCDF, and I can tell you, two of those solutions are focused on payment, and we had a number of applications, over 40 applications to provide payment services, from the region across the globe as well. We also did a fintech sprint for eKYC solution for the OACS and their Dcash, and we struggled to find participants within that category. So one of the things that we're trying to do is how do we incentivize different categories in the fintech sector, because really and truly that's where the fintechs really play a vital role, being that connector with the customer, with the merchant, and the FI sector, because that is where the FIs don't do too well. They don't do too well in terms of being agile and being able to develop that type of technology and roll it out, in that sort of manner. So that really is kind of summing up, Pauline, what we are trying to do in terms of understanding the behavior of the citizens, working with the sector in terms of providing the forms of acceptance, but at the same time, getting the fintechs to come in to provide those services, and that's the ecosystem we're trying to curate there. The challenge is we know the what, the how, and how you put that together, is the catch-22.
So John, I feel like you stopped me on a Sunday, because market, doubles, and bread. Like, why are you talking
that is
to
everybody? That is the Caribbean's customer journey, right?
Yes, absolutely. The fact that is such a common sort of a Sunday morning, it's so interesting, and data.
And
That's what
Eldred
data
said it,
helps.
even for the merchants, right? Because if I go to the doubles man with $20, after decide, do I get a triples? Could I afford just a triple? I really want two triples, but I've had to settle for a hybrid, right? So it reduces the movement of trade, right? Because I have more money in my account than what I would physically have in cash, right? And we all see what's happening, particularly with persons, and crime and so forth all over. Cash moving with cash, it's a liability.
Yes, that is such an interesting point. And John, you mentioned something a few times, and I know usually KYC is know your customer. Can you just let us know what eKYC is?
So exactly what Chris was alluding to, right? When you have to go to the bank and you have to fill out the forms, your name, your address, all your bio details, what sort of business you're in, provide documentation, your IDs, and so forth, right? So for every institution that operates under a regulator, the regulator, is the one that presides over this information. So what the KYC is simply providing a digital process where you can do that. So for example, you can go online, you enter your details, you take a picture of your passport, you take a picture of your ID, you smile, it takes a picture of you, you provide all the information in a digital format, and then you submit that, and you're off to the races, Because if you think about it, going to an institution that's open between the hours of 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday, that really in itself is an entire process. But if I can do this on the weekend, I can do this 8 o'clock at night, I could simply onboard myself anytime, anywhere, that immediately is going to provide what I would say a huge inflow of persons at least being able to access, these sorts of services.
Yeah, and that doubles conversations actually relevant to Barbados as well, because now it's all over. So um what we do, being able to integrate convenience is so important. All
But we
right,
saw it in
so
Brazil, right? Just the last point I want to raise it in terms of coming
mhm.
into this is, so Brazil is a real good example, right? Brazil is like nearly 214 million people. And in the last 2 years, they rolled out something called the Brazilian Pix, which is basically a real-time payment system that was sponsored by the central bank. I think today, over 135 million Brazilians use that system. I understand you can no longer go on Rio de Janeiro and pay for caipirinha in cash. They ask you to use Pix. Meaning that the merchants are the ones that are driving it. They don't want cash. They want you to pay digitally. So sometimes we had to look at these case studies, and this where the omni-channel comes in, right? Because again, it could be cards, it could be a wallet, the different types of acceptance. People have been asking, why we don't accept Apple Pay and Google Pay in the Caribbean, right? But we do, to be honest. When you look at, once the point of sale is tap and pay enabled, you can use those products, but again, you can't sign up for those products in the Caribbean. If you have it in the US, you can come and use it, and again, the awareness and the education in terms of how, and Chris and team would know this, how the infrastructure is evolving, and what the rails allow for, I think is a big part in terms of the consumers and the merchants understanding, how to leverage that in their day-to-day business.
Yes, having that perspective from the Caribbean while looking at information around the world, I think it's so important for us to move forward. So, what we're gonna do up next, because we have been, really getting into the omni-channel payments across the Caribbean and payment security, we do have quite a number of questions to answer in the comments. So we're gonna go on a break. Next up, you're gonna get to find out what a day in a life is looking like at First Atlantic Commerce with our new team member Eldred Garcia, and we'll be right back after this.
I've been working remotely for roughly 16, 17 years. I'm much more efficient and effective working remotely. I have a very flexible schedule, but that means I work a lot of hours. I have traditionally worked across multiple time zones. For me, I wake up 6 o'clock in the morning. I have my coffee, and by 6:30, I'm checking emails, responding to emails, and start writing out a laundry list of things I need to accomplish during the day. Usually, that list has rolled over from the day before. That period between 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock in the morning Eastern allows me to really focus on getting a lot of stuff done before the average person walks into the office. And then between 9 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I am doing the regular day stuff, responding to emails, having conference calls, doing presentations, whatever the daily routine looks like for a normal person, if you will. That's my 9 to 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, I actually get up. I haven't eaten lunch yet. 4 o'clock, I get up, and I go work out. My main objective is to ensure that everyone has access to digital payments, is financially included in the system, so they can live their daily lives in a much more, and much easier way.
And welcome back to First Atlantic Commerce. FAC Live covers all things e-commerce with guest journalists from different islands sharing their knowledge on this digital world that we're all living. And if you just watch that feature, the digital world means working remotely, and that could be you guys. That could be you. Let's just get this integration of digital payments and omni-channel discussion so you can know how to integrate this into your business. So we have a panel of very, very experienced guests today, and we also have some questions to be answered. So I'm going to get straight into the comment section because we have them from LinkedIn and YouTube. And this question feels very technical, so I'm just gonna ask it up there, and you guys can pick it up. So, does FAC have any intention to integrate CDBs or stablecoins into any omni-channel solution within the next 3 years? So I don't have the user's name on the comment section, but I don't know who wants to take a stab at this one.
That was my
Chris,
question. So, Chris, you can.
Oh, okay.
Nah, joking.
I was like, all right, John, get in there. Chris, you wanna? Oh, Chris is. Oh, you're on mute there. You're taking it there, Chris.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we're following that very closely. So ever since cryptocurrencies came out, we have been looking at what it will take to add a stable coin or a cryptocurrency to our gateway. So the gateway is is effectively a master switch. So whether it's a MasterCard or an Amex, we can choose which route that transaction needs to take to ultimately get that merchant paid. So we view crypto and stable coins in a similar manner, that we can integrate that into the gateway. So we as an organization are very customer led in terms of the solutions that we bring to market. So as we see the demand increasing, we add the solutions into the overall product offering. So cryptocurrencies, we in all honesty, with the near 10,000 merchants we have on the platform, we've had a handful maybe ask us about accepting cryptocurrencies to as a method of payment for their store or their online service, for example. Stable coins is something that I think is going to probably be more popular from that side, and we're starting to see more about that. We've looked at things like Sand Dollar, for example, in Bahamas. We know Jamaica is putting a lot of time and energy into their stable coin, but also we've seen things like Dcash having various degrees of success over the years. So we are looking at it very carefully. If I was a betting man to see is something that we're going to have within the next 3 years, I would probably say yes within there. But we'll be led by the demand, by the market. So we're not ones for creating solutions and looking for problems, as it were. But we're monitoring it very closely.
Alrighty. So up next we have Russell on LinkedIn. Does FAC have a payment gateway to allow businesses to integrate with their existing website or app? If not, can FAC recommend payment gateways?
That's got Eldred written all over it.
Okay. I will take this. So yes, FAC is a gateway, and yes, we can integrate into your merchant's website. There's a number of different ways we can integrate either directly or through facilitators, if you will, that have plugins and shopping carts, whether it's a complex shopping cart that you can add items to and check out, or whether it's a simple payment link that you can just send to somebody. But the short answer is yes. We can connect to your website. We are the gateway, if you will. So can we recommend a gateway? Yes, us. We are connected across 29 countries, and we probably have integrations with all the major financial institutions across the Caribbean and Central America. Having said this, and I hope that answers your question directly. Having said that, one of the things that Chris mentioned is that we are absolutely customer driven. And right now there are three main things that our customers are asking for. And I think it's important to put this in perspective, because while, stable coins or cryptocurrency is absolutely in the top of a lot of people's minds, when you actually start driving down in the conversation and you say, is it a game changer? And right now, while it's not, it probably will be. But the three main things that are driving conversations are fraud prevention. How do I make sure that every dollar that I bring in, half of it doesn't go out the back, right? Through either somebody breaking into their system and stealing their data and having associated fines and whatnot. So that is on top of people's mind, especially when we're talking about omni-channel payments. When we're expanding the way we take payments, we want to make sure that we do it in a secure way. And one of the things that we're doing at FAC is making sure that as we look into the future and the expansion of omni-channels, we want to make sure that all of that is protected. There's a whole conversation about how we do that, and we can get into that. But the next thing that's really on top of people's mind is, John was saying it, Chris mentioned it as well. How do we get those devices, if you will, into the hands of that, that doubles merchant that's sitting there that can't take payments? How do we address the challenges that exist in the cost of a physical terminal, the purchase of those terminals that usually come from abroad, the injection of security, encrypted keys and whatnot at certified key injection facilities that are typically existing outside of our region and having to get shipped in and go into customs. And anybody who has purchased something from abroad understands that very well, not only the time and the cost, but all the challenges that represents. How do we address those challenges so those merchants can start taking payments? We do have the answers for that. There is technology to, if you will, leapfrog the traditional way of getting a physical terminal into a merchant's hand. John mentioned it is, soft pause is going to be a game changer for our region. We can get, again, into the granulars of that. And the next thing that we haven't even touched yet is the expansion of e-commerce. So e-commerce, as we know it, is card not present. So think about your traditional, you're at home in your PJs and your flip-flops trying to buy something online. That's your traditional e-commerce. But if we look at the new generation, and even the old generation is participating in this, you're constantly on social media, right? You're communicating back and forth, and your purchases are now driven, instead of ad-driven, your purchases are driven by influencers, social media influencers. So you're actually interacting in a social media environment, and you're now interacting in a commerce way. So how do we marry that social media environment into your card not present environment, where you expand e-commerce and you create additional revenue streams for your customers? And we're doing that as well. Again, a lot of details into those pieces of conversation, but those are really the customer-driven conversation that we at FAC are dealing with right now. The fraud prevention, the ability of customers to be able to accept payments in the physical environment, and the expansion of e-commerce in the new channels that exist.
Thank you so much, Eldred, for answering that question. So we're gonna close it off with a question that I'm gonna ask everyone. I'll start with John. I want you to think about one strategy, if folks are watching this now, live or on the replay, that an organization can employ to educate and train their employees on data security in omni-channel payments. If you just give us one quick strategy, and it could come from, obviously your wealth of knowledge, as well as being a consumer.
At a very high level, I think when it comes to cybersecurity and data privacy and those sort of challenges, the risk is always internal to the organization. So the one tip I would share is, because you would always have somebody in the organization who's going to click on a link on some email, and that is what is going to basically render into inoperable. It's not really from the outside, but really it's the persons within. So definitely awareness of all these new trends, ransomware, phishing, all of these different things. I think internal awareness from the employees is an absolute critical component into the safeguarding.
Yeah, and I could add to it that Google has some really good free courses called Google Digital Garage. You can Google it, it's fantastic. So, for Eldred, do you have a step or strategy that organizations can employ to educate and train their employees on data security in omni-channel payments?
Pauline, yes, I do, and Chris knows this is near and dear to my heart. So there's two sides of the equation, right? You have the issuing side with banks that issue credit cards, and then you have the acquiring side, the banks that have the relationship with merchants. On both sides, there are two different strategies. One on the issuing side is the intelligence. It's more about cyber intelligence versus cybersecurity. They're used interchangeably, but they're quite different. Cyber intelligence is understanding the information that you have available to you in order for you to be proactive rather than reactive. Cyber intelligence is about being able to understand what information has been compromised, where is it in the compromise stage, and when I say in the compromise stage, information gets hacked and then it gets repackaged, if you will, in the darknet, and before it gets used you have a window of opportunity to be proactive. Either shut down bins, change passwords, do a number of different things. So from an issuing side of the house, cyber intelligence is critical, and there's a lot of different solutions that are out there. More than happy to talk to you about that from the issuing side. On the acquiring side, the strategy is very specific. Devalue the information, right? So encryption and tokenizations are key. The old strategy of creating layers of protection. Think about the airport. You have to go through layers of protection, but ultimately, and unfortunately, somebody can get through them and create havoc. In the payments world, we had similar things for a very long time. We have layers of protection in order to prevent somebody from breaking in, but we all know that if somebody wants to break in, they will break in. So the new strategy is remove the gold from the vault. You can't steal what you don't have. So encryption is devaluing the information, and tokenization is for storing devalued information for later use. Think about recurring transactions and whatnot. So two different strategies, but they're both critical because they are very specific to the side of the house that you're on.
Yes, and as Beverly has rightfully said, this is a very insightful conversation because in the real world, or the world that we're accustomed to, usually we have security measures like your locks, making sure you have your car alarms, but we just have to shift that mentality to digital, and I think that may be a hurdle for many. So Chris, I would have asked you the same question, but someone asked something in the comment section, and as the CEO, we pivot. We pivot and we go with what's happening now. So Ikichi wants to know, Ikichi Griffith, does let's try that again. Does FAC have a documented API that technical teams can utilize in a playground trial environment to test stuff in?
So short answer is yes. So we have a brand new website, so firstatlanticcommerce.com, and if you just go to that website, there is a developers tab on the top right hand side, and that will give you access to all our integration documentation from that side. So it's very clear, concise, easy to search, and once you're at a point where you want to look at a test box, sort of sandbox type environment, you can contact us via the website, and we'd be more than happy to set that up for you. So we want to encourage people to view and use the technology as much as possible to make sure that they understand how simplified we've made it to allow people to get online and start taking payments.
That's a great answer. Do you want to close off with the strategy conversation, or you think Eldred and John did it?
Well, I think that John and Eldred have done a great job there, and as a CEO, I think it's very easy for people to only spend your budget on things that generate revenue. But my advice would certainly be to listen to the experts and make sure that you are putting the right amount of attention and budget into cybersecurity, because it will be a lot more expensive for you to dig yourself out of that hole than to protect yourself in the first place.
Well, on that note, I think that's a fantastic way for us to end the show. Ikechi, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. The link to the FAC website is on the comment section. You could click it out there. And anything we discussed, as well as the Trinidad and Tobago Financial Sector Center website, all of that is in the comment section. So thanks again to Eldred and John for joining us today as we discuss omni-channel payments across the Caribbean and payment security. Be sure to follow our page to be notified when our next FAC live panel discussion occurs. Thanks again for joining us and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.